and a candy man. Like a freight train rolling, bringing truth bombs down the line. Promoting the Southland 1 week at a time. Promoting the Southland 1 week at a time. SCV chat starts now.
You caught me producing. I thought I'd get done enough to share the episode out. Welcome to SCV chat. It is 7. We're a little late, but that's my fault. It's a little past 7 on a Monday afternoon, so you know what time it is. It's time for your weekly episode of SCV chat. Before we get started, please remember the views and opinions expressed in this broadcast are not necessarily the views and opinions of the SCV, its GC, nor division, brigade, camps, or any subsidiaries, strictly those expressing them. How is everybody doing in Dixieland tonight? We are carrying on our festivities, I guess, when it comes to Confederate History and Heritage Month here in the great state of Mississippi. And, of course, all throughout the Southland, it is Confederate Heritage Month. And in this month, SCV Chat does try to come up with some of the biggest episodes of our season. And tonight we are continuing on in that tradition with Mr. Jeb Smith, author of Defending Dixie's Land. And he is going to be coming on, and we're going to just be talking about his book. Some great information come out of that. I cannot wait for y'all to hear it. We always love trying to give our viewers, which is you great people. I just realized I'm wearing my work hat and not my SCV chat hat, but, you know, it happens. But we always love trying to give our viewers something special. And, of course, ways to defend the South. And tonight, I think we have another great tool for the toolbox, to quote past Commander-in-Chief Jason Boshears. How is everybody doing? I would ask that you please share this episode out. We have a great guest on tonight, and we have a lot of great talking points, I'll say. I'm very excited for tonight. We are going to let y'all share this out, get a couple more people in. I'm still in the process of sharing like you should be. So I'm going, well, there goes my screen. Let me get right back to sharing and scroll to the bottom. You could do like I do and share it to your, I have an SCV page, and tonight I will share to, let me find it, my historian page. Look at that, 2 shares. So I want to be seeing some shares. Remember that. I want to see a big crowd tonight. So I hope everybody's doing in the great land of Dixieland. It's awesome to see Todd from California, past Commander-in-Chief, the legend, the most sharp-dressed man in the SCV, Paul Grambling Jr., Mr. Todd, past Historian-Chief Al from the great state of Tennessee. Good to see you. Good to see you. Apologies. It is pollen season in the South, and it tears me up every year. Can't get past it. Charles Ray, good to see you. Alan, good to see you. Derek, good to see you. Good to see everybody. It looks like we had a big crowd on YouTube tonight with Dr. Sandy Mitchum, famous historian in his own right, author of course, so many books I couldn't even begin to name them. One of my favorites is, of course, Bust Hell Wide Open, the Nathan Bedford Forrest story. Considering I'm named after General Forrest, hey, I like that book. It's a great book. It's probably one of the first history books I went out and seeked myself. I really loved it. And of course, I read that when General Forrest was being reinterned at SCV headquarters. I had to, I'm a listener because I'm dyslexic. I may have, Dr. Mitchum, your book is great. So don't take this the wrong way because I know he's going to give me a phone call after the show. I accidentally might have fallen asleep the first time. I also have ADHD. It's not my fault. It's a long drive from Mississippi to Tennessee. And I had to stay up almost all night at the reinterment to reread the book. But it was a great book nonetheless. Good to see the museum at Market Hall, one of our proud sponsors. And of course, they were last week's episode. So go check them out. It was a great episode. I was working. I did have the show playing in the background, which if my boss is watching, I make no apologies for. So go check them out. They have a great museum. Of course, love our UDC ladies and all their hard work out of Chapter 4 there. My gosh, just hearing about some of the stuff y'all do. Thank you. Thank you for the work you do for our veterans and the cause. All right, everybody. Well, it is Dr. Mitchell, you deserve that and so much more. Again, famous historian, great man, one of my mentors when it comes to me trying to become a historian. Just absolute great guy. I can always call him and ask him about history questions and probably maybe a little bit bug him. He wouldn't admit that, I think, but I probably do just a little bit. But of course, tonight's historian, you might know him as Isaac C. Bishop. That is his pen name. And of course, he wrote Defending Dixieland, What Every American Should Know About the South and the Civil War. So I'm very interested to bring him on. Of course, he is spoken very highly of over at one of our favorite resources, one of our favorite people, the Abbeville Institute, and of course, one of their big contributors and a legend in his own right when it comes to being a historian and his work for the South. Dr. Clyde Wilson gave some glowing recommendations about Mr. Smith's book, and I believe one of them. Let's see here. I have him quoted. I messed with Mr. Smith before we started the show and said, don't worry. I made sure to give you a glowing recommendation because I guess I've become famous for my recommendations now and my introductions. But this is the quote. Of course, the great historian, Dr. Clyde Wilson. Bishop bases his case on many sources that are long neglected and draws new insight from them. This is a real historian, the real thing, who follows the evidence. He also quotes a good deal from the work of several Abbeville scholars. That's an exact quote. Of course, being told you are the real deal by Dr. Wilson is the best recommendation, the best introduction I can give. Of course, famous historian in his own right. And without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen of SCV Chat, my chat heads, please welcome Mr. Jeb Smith.
Thank you for having me on.
We
Glad
are
to be here.
Have you on. I have been looking forward to this episode. I told you this. I'll tell the chat. We invited you on a couple weeks ago when we were getting ready for April. But I've been wanting to have you on for a couple months now when I discovered your book and, of course, some of the great stuff written by the Abbeville Institute about you. And I've been wanting to have you on for a while. And we had even settled on having you on sometime in April. And we were like, does anybody know who Isaac Bishop is? And can we get his phone number or email? And out of thin air, the great adjutant-in-chief and, of course, Alabama Division Commander Jimmy Hill gave us your contact information. He was luckily like, hey, I think I found y'all a great guest. And I was like, you have no idea. Yes, I'll take his email. And, of course, you are, and James Martin points us out, you are a friend of the Alabama Division and did a great job at the Alabama Education Conference.
Thank you, James. Yep. Yeah. After that talk, it went really well. And they made me a friend. And I'm actually just became a member in Tennessee, the Sons of Confederate Veterans. David Daniels of the National Sons of Confederate Veterans Genealogy Department went and searched for me some of my family history. And he found I'm a 6th generation cousin to Alabama General John Hunts Morgan. And so that I just barely got in. I got the certificate yesterday in the mail. So I'm now an official member of the Sons of Confederate Veterans. And I would have never imagined that I'd have any Southern ties because my family's all New England and Canada. But when you're able to go 6 generations deep to find someone, you can kind of sneak in that way. And I'm just a little further out, a descendant of Nathan Bedford Forrest and Robert E. Lee. And we also found that there's a Virginia private that fought during the war, and his name is Isaac Bishop, and which is kind of just blows your mind because that's a pen name I kind of, took out of thin air, and then I happen to be an ancestor of an Isaac Bishop that fought for Virginia. It's quite a coincidence, I'd say.
I was about to say it was meant to be. I will say welcome. I call the SCV a Southern Brotherhood, so I'm happy to see that you have joined our ranks. And of course, I guess the first question I have to ask, because while I enjoy pen names, I have used a couple of them in my historical articles that I've written simply because I am easily cancelable. So I understand, but it kind of still threw us for the loop. Why did you use the pen name?
Right, and that's usually always the first question I get. And obviously, I live here in Vermont, and I have 4 children. 2 of them were homeschooled at the time. 2 were in a public school, and I didn't want them negatively affected or influenced by friends or by teachers. I didn't want word getting out. We live in a town of 500 people or whatever, that their father wrote this pro-South book, because immediately in Vermont they're going to think racism. That's the first thought about anything related to the Confederacy or the South. And so I didn't want my kids negatively influenced and tagged with that. They now one's out of school, but they now all attend a private Christian school in the area. And so to me, it's a conservative Christian school, and I'm not as worried. I know the teacher. I've talked with the history teacher. He's a great guy. He has a copy of my book. They're very pro-North, though. They go to Gettysburg every year at the end of the year. The school, I think the street and everything is named after Lincoln. So they're huge Northern. They give the Northern viewpoint at this school. And so I'm hoping that now that the history teacher has a copy of my book, it could lead to some discussions, or maybe even inviting me in to give the other perspective on the South and the Civil War. And it would drive my kids nuts because they'd be embarrassed. So that'd make it all the more fun.
Oh yeah. I mean, I trust me, I get it. It's not just where you live. Anywhere in the world, even in the South, you can get in big trouble for telling everybody you're pro-Southern in this sadly today's age and historian world. They don't allow other viewpoints. So I am very happy that you did do that, and I'm of course thankful that you had the knowledge to use a pen name to protect your family. That's a very honorable thing to do. And of course, that's awesome. But I will say, Gettysburg will trick you, because out of all the battlefields I've been to, for some reason, the one out of the South is the most non-biased.
Really?
When I toured there a couple years ago, this was before 2020. So who knows what's changed?
Right. I haven't been able to make it. I've always wanted to make the reenactment, especially just because it's closer for me, especially in Pennsylvania, and it's obviously a huge event. There's a lot of people there, so I've always wanted to go. I wasn't able to make it, I think, because due to work last year when they went, but I asked them all the questions. But yeah, I definitely want to make that. It's good to hear that it's not as biased.
Like you'll think so one of my first battlefields I ever went to was Vicksburg. I'm a big Vicksburg and Shiloh guy. I love those battles. And I remember seeing Vicksburg as a child and seeing Vicksburg today, and it breaks my heart. And we toured all throughout Virginia, and I mean, just blasting on my heroes, the Southern viewpoint, just making sure to beat them in the ground, because you don't want to be called what I've deemed the R word as a Southerner. That's the worst thing you can be called. You'll lie about historical facts, but you're not getting called that word. And I went to Gettysburg, and I remember being like, why is there's still some Northern bias, obviously, but it's not nowhere near as bad as Southern battlefields, which still blows my mind. But yeah,
I'm sure
I
it's
do recommend
kind of, I read that a lot of theological seminaries and such, they moved to the South to re-educate them. And I wonder if, after the war, because obviously they're slave owners, so they must have Christianity wrong, is their perspective. And I think maybe the battlefields are like that. Like, this is our chance, that Southerners who are interested in the Civil War, that like the South, here's our chance to kind of, make sure that we put an end to that. Maybe I don't know. I'm just speculating, but I could see that in parts, like, make sure those guys in Mississippi end up hating the South when they leave the battlefield. And
I can attest to it as someone that originally, as I deem myself a historian in training because I feel like that's a very important title, and I'm not throwing it on myself without feeling like I've earned it. But when I first went to college, I was like, man, I can't wait to be a historian and defend the South. And it was before I knew about the whole world. I guess I grew up in this little bubble, and the SCV, the battle flag, Dixie, it was all awesome in my small little town before I left. It's so much has changed now, but I went and no, Southern colleges don't like to hire in state. They all teach the Northern perspective and demonize the South. You can't leave that college or any Southern college without hating the South. So I'm not shocked that it went in to, because where do you go after you get a degree in history? Where you're either a teacher or working in these sectors.
Yeah,
and it has sadly affected all our parks down here. But that's a topic for another time. You'll learn on this show, Mr. Smith, we get off topic very easily. So I am going to jump back into the questions.
Sure.
Before I get too much on a ramble, the audience knows how bad I am.
I can do the same. So,
but I would love to know what inspired you to write this book in the first place.
When I'm taught a certain way about anything and I believe it and it affects my life, especially in my perspective on things that are of interest to me, such as the American Civil War between the states, whatever you want to call it. And I find out that I was misled, that I get upset in a way, and I want to know why I was misled, what was the purpose for it, and then I kind of want a reaction to that, because if I see everyone else as being misled as well, I want to counter all the false narratives out there and show people the truth as much as I can. Let them make up their own minds. I don't like indoctrination in any form. I like all perspectives being heard and debated, and I don't see that happening. Instead, I see we have this one set way of teaching, and everyone gets it, and everyone just accepts it because everyone else does. And then it's an easy way to destroy and bury truth, and ultimately it's to reveal what is true. And once people learn that they've been misled about one subject, they're more willing to question other subjects as well. So it's kind of freeing of the mind, and revealing truth is enough reason for me to get me interested in the subject.
Yeah, no, that might be one of my new favorite quotes. Yeah, when you figured out you've been lied to about this, what else are they lying to you about when it comes to our history as Americans? And I will say, I think a lot of people have realized that with them now attacking the founding generation. Of all the people in history to attack, you pick those second. Okay. So I am happy they did it, because now I think it's opening a lot of people's eyes. But that is very interesting. And kind of to piggyback off that, who did you write this book for? Was it for academic historians? Was it for everyday people, or kind of both? You want both people to be able to walk away with something.
Yeah, I would say is aimed at lay people. Really, I was kind of writing for friends, family, and people that I'd run into in Vermont, and be able to say, here's how you're being lied to. I think a lot of people have enjoyed the original sources that I put in the text, and that way you could say it's for a scholar. But I think anyone who's after truth will find this book enjoyable. I think anyone can read it and understand it. The average adult is definitely intelligent enough, and I think it's clear enough. You don't have to read very far if you're a Vermonter to know that you've been lied to, just by being able to see the original sources of the various subjects that I cover. They're going to say, how come I never heard about this before? Where's this all from? And that's part of why I want the original sources out clearly in the text, so people could go look it up and they can see the dates. Because one of the things that I constantly hear is that the Lost Cause arose after the war, and they kind of rewrote the Southern perspective occurred after the war. So that's part of why I wanted to say, no, look at the wartime sources, look at leading up to it. This is not something that was created after. Really, the standard view was created after the war, when really the Southern view is what's historical, what happened in that time. And so I think it's for everyone.
Well, I first want to thank you for putting sources in, not just because of the historian in me, but I do kind of like you said, I love finding these things and being like, all right, I can save that for later.
Yeah.
I love being
Yeah.
able to bring stuff up in arguments. And so if there's any, first off, get the book because it's great. And speaking of which, I'm glad I said that because I do have a little link by Shotwell
Yeah.
Publishing.
Wow.
So
Speaking
you
of which,
can
I'm
get
going to
his
hold up
book.
my mug right here. You get Shotwell. Great mug.
And first off, you should get the book because it's a great book and you're going to learn a lot. I sadly hadn't read it all yet because of work, but I can say I am enjoying what I've gotten so far. It's been a great book. I've been able to get a lot of questions from this and just glancing at it. So get it for that. Get it for the resources in there because there's a lot of great stuff in there. But
One thing you mentioned, I think part of how I wrote it, constructed it, was for a debate, because I learned the Southern perspective, but I didn't know if it was actually true. And to me, you really have to debate and get the other side. I'd convinced myself that the Southern view was correct, but I wanted to go out and debate with people who said, no, you're wrong, you're false. And so that's what I did for a very long time. And it ended up just reinforcing my views. But the text is written almost as a debate, like here's a subject, here's material you can use to counter this argument if you're debating or engaging someone. And I think that way it's really accessible to people who want that content to respond to arguments, or to be able to put together arguments yourself. The text is laid out with that in mind, kind of in the back of my head subconsciously.
Well, for one, I'll first off thank you because obviously being online and being what I have started deemed as a digital historian, someone who does a lot of online debates on with other names, mind you. Uh, I do love having resources. I love them. I love them. I love them. And kind of again, going deeper into this, if someone had one takeaway from reading your book, what would you like that to be?
That they recognize that the winner writes the history, and that America is no exception. We're absolutely, it's hard for anyone growing up in whatever culture or education system they're raised in to question what they were taught, in what society accepts and believes. And I always use the example, you go to a country under Sharia law or Iran, the scholars, the historians, the theologians, they believe Islam is true because of the way it's taught in their education system, in their society. It's hard to get a critical opinion of Islam that's allowed. So everything is just twisted, I guess, or you get the pro Muslim perspective. It's the same thing in America, in regarding the Civil War especially. Everything's kind of the northern perspective, and it doesn't take a whole lot of work to realize you've been lied to, but it takes the willingness to question and admit that you've been lied to and you accepted a lie. But once you do that, it's kind of a never-ending quest, because you're going to want to learn more and more and see how deep the rabbit hole goes.
I can add to that, yeah, because I always knew about the Southern perspective, but I never really had to defend it before. And so I love finding, as you said, these resources like your book to dive into it and be able to say, okay, well, next time I get this question, I now know what I can say. And so I do like that. Now, kind of going off what I've deemed the warm-up questions, I have some interesting questions for you now. Or interesting is the wrong word. I have some deeper thinking ones, I guess is the term. How much of today's division in America do you think comes from how we have taught the war between the states history?
Oh, I'm obviously in certain circles, I think it's huge. whenever you demonize half the country falsely, that's going to lead to them wanting to defend themselves, and it's going to lead towards other groups despising them unjustly, I think. So it kind of sets people at war already. I think anytime we nationalize anything too, when we became a nation under Lincoln, you lose that diversity, you lose a live and let live attitude, and now everything becomes contentious because it's now the winner takes all and then forces it on everyone else. So anytime you nationalize something, it's going to cause strife. And yeah, the war does not do anything to unite, or the way it's taught, it does not do anything to unite us. It definitely divides us.
All right. I do agree with that. From someone who felt attacked as soon as he got to college. Yeah. Now, again, this is a what if question. We had a lot of fun with what if history a couple episodes ago, so I thought I'd add a little kernel in here for you. If the South was allowed to peacefully succeed, how different do you think American history would be today?
That's great. That is such a good question. Are we talking about the Cotton States, the Deep South, or the Confederacy as a whole? You're just talking about the initial secession movement, correct?
Yeah. Let's just keep it to the original secession movement.
I think it would have led to the North, perhaps economically being in deep trouble. I think the South would have had free trade, and Europe would have traded with the southern ports, and economically they would become the most dominant country in the world, really, at that time. And I think you would have seen northern states eventually, both slave and free states, join the Confederacy due to the Constitution and the free trade. And I think the Republican Party agenda would have fallen apart because it was all on higher taxation, higher tariffs, and they would not have been able to compete with the Cotton States' free trade, which means Lincoln and the Republican Party would have just completely been destroyed. I think the Upper South would have stayed in the Union for a while, but I think over time, economically, more and more states would end up moving south. I also think the South would have had more of a peace platform internationally, not been involved with wars such as World War I and so on. And the North, again, the United States, would not have been as powerful. Maybe it wouldn't have gotten involved across the world because it's no longer the superpower. And who knows what that would change, because that would change everything. It's hard to, speculate on how radically different the world could be had the South seceded. I mean, eventually slavery would have dissipated and ended. And I wonder what that would have done economically in the South. And would they have industrialized as the North had? I would assume they'd eventually do that. We probably would have seen states switch too. Like some states go to the Confederacy for a while and then return to the Union, and vice versa. So, there's so many moving pieces and puzzles in that. I think immediately the North falls apart economically and the South becomes the richest country in the nation, and they maintain that more of a decentralized Confederacy, more libertarian policy. And we would have had two options in America instead of one centralized nation that's always on this progressive movement towards authoritarianism.
That's why I love those questions. Just the thought that you can do. I loved your answer there. So the next question is kind of another one of those thinking questions. Do you think, because I obviously will quote the victor does write the history, and they're always going to try to make themselves look like the conquering heroes. Just like how if I went to New England, I guarantee you they're not talking about the American Revolution the same as we do. But, do you think history is being written or just misinterpreted? Like, do you think it's just a little bit, or do you think they're completely trying to rewrite our history to, I don't even know what the goal is some of the time.
I think by now, I've thought about this actually. I think by now they're just repeating what they're told. And so you grow up, your professors teach you it, other historians, you read their books, everyone in your culture thinks and teaches a certain way. So you don't have a reason not to. And so you kind of just fall in line. Like, I don't think most of the teachers today are specifically trying to, make the South look bad. It's what they've been taught, and they're just simply passing it on. It only takes one generation to kind of institute a lie and pass it on. And I think of the Pledge of Allegiance. We pledge to one nation under God. That was Walter Bellamy, I believe, a socialist who was a big Northern supporter, loved the idea of a centralized nation. And they're training the next generation of kids, which is always how it happens. When you want to institute a lie, you do it with the young because you can do that easily. Now you let the older generation die off. And so their institution, or they're starting a new mindset and a new way of teaching. That next generation is raised with it. They teach the next generation, and so on. So it's really only the initial generation or two usually that can create that lie purposely, and then multiple generations later, they're just passing on what they think is truth. There's no intention behind it. And so I think we're at that point, and have been at that point for a long time. It's not intentional hatred of the South or whatever. It's just passing on what we already know to be true. The problem is what we know to be true is not true. You don't know what you don't know, and that's where we are today, because it's so much time has passed on.
I will agree with that. I don't think everybody has the evil intent to hurt the South. I have seen some of that, but I would kind of agree with you. It's not the majority of them.
I said actually at the talk in Alabama that we mentioned before, I said how many in the North, we don't have a bias against the South, and that's why we lie about them or misrepresent them. It's because of what we taught that creates the bias against the South. And so it's a learned bias based on false teaching.
Yeah, no, I have seen that as well from my few interaction with Northerners when, of course, I was at college. So I am glad to see that that's the case, because that can be fixed. I do believe.
And that's not everyone, of course. There's a lot of people, I think, in Vermont and in the North that want to feel better than the South. They want everyone does this. They want someone to look down upon, to blame everything for, to make themselves feel better about themselves. And it seems to happen a lot in the North. So there's definitely that would just take any group that differs from them and try to make themselves feel superior to them. So there's definitely that aspect as well. And it's culturally acceptable to hate Southern whites in the Confederacy. So it's just an acceptable mode of feeling superior. It's a form of racism, really, but it's culturally acceptable, so that so it's popular.
Yeah, I do agree with that. Yeah, it is definitely popular. I don't think some of them realize it. Sorry, I'm answering. I got a work text, of course. Let me finish that. And the next question would be, this is kind of one that just popped in my head. You might not be able to answer this with not having, all your research out in front of you, but if you could think, what sources did you probably rely on the most, and which one surprised you the most, probably, when you were doing the research for this book?
I'd say, especially for the slavery chapters, I'm sure you read that because it was the first chapter, is the slave narratives. I did quite extensive research into those interviews of former slaves, and that probably surprised me the most out of any one single source. And I think I use it pretty substantially for slavery. Same time, just reading Lincoln's major speeches, in Vermont, you're taught a certain thing about him, and it's like, I just started reading his most popular speeches, and it doesn't take long to get into him and be like, who is this? This is not the person that I was taught growing up. This is far different than the idol that they've made of him. So, but the slave narratives definitely were a surprise to me, because in my mind, slavery, of course, was this inhumane, most diabolical thing. Every master mistreated their slave. They didn't feed them. They beat them. They were racist. And so that was my mindset going in. And when I actually heard what the slaves said about what slavery was like, it blew my mind.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that more in a second. Just kind of something that when we were talking about sources earlier, that one kind of popped in my head, and so I kind of wanted to ask that while it was on my mind. We're going to ask one more question, and after that, we are going to go into a commercial break, everybody. So don't hit the dial, don't turn the channel just yet. And after we get back, we got some Lincoln questions, and we got some other questions that I'm sure everybody's going to love because I have been waiting to ask them all show. I'm so excited about the last couple questions. But before we kind of get into that, with a book like this, and we've already talked a bit about how if you are one of those historians or one of those people that try to defend the South, you are canceled immediately. You're called you're racist, you're evil, you're the scum of humanity. I'm sure at some point people have, I know I have been compared to the worst of the worst.
Right.
Hashtag, World War II Germany. Can't say that word on here because that's one of the words that gets you in trouble real quick. But been compared to that. So, how do you respond to the critics who disagree with your research and your findings?
I've definitely changed in how I do that. Again, I started debating. That's kind of how this all initiated, and I was always outnumbered, and I'd get every remark possible. Attacks on me personally or whatever, assumptions about me. And I guess it didn't really bother me. I kept trying to point back to, okay, what's the actual evidence, historical evidence? This is what I'm talking about. I don't really want to get into name calling. I don't care what you think of me. I want to know what's true. And so I would continually go back to a historical subject, bring it back to history. Now I don't even care anymore. I don't waste time with a lot of people or a lot of comments. It's especially online or social media. People can say, in a couple of sentences, get 10 things wrong that it would need an entire chapter really written out to just completely show them incorrect. And it's like, I don't have time for that. These people are not actually interested in truth. They're just having somewhat of an emotional reaction based on their prejudices. They're not going to dig into the original sources. They're not coming to this with an open mind. So more and more, I now just kind of ignore them and don't care. If it was like an official debate, I'm actually going to start looking to do those in the area in Vermont. It shouldn't be hard to find. That is more agreeable to me because they're going to be more serious, and we're going to talk about about history and what's actually true, and it won't lead down to this social media name calling and racism, all that. I just kind of ignore it at this point. It's really, it has nothing to do with my interest.
Oh, that's a great response right there. All right, everybody, we're going to take a quick commercial break, and when we come back, we're going to be talking about Lincoln. We're going, as I said, ask some of the questions I've been interested into talking about, and of course, then we'll be starting to wrap up the show at that point. So we'll be right back. But first, a word from our sponsors. Of course, check out SCV Chat on Patreon. For $2.50 a month, you get to feed a moose. That's a general support tier for us. Of course, for $10 a month, you become a real chat head. You get behind-the-scenes content, some of the great projects we're working on, and, of course, so much more on that. And, of course, you get your name at the end of every episode scrolling across the bottom of the screen. For $30 a month, you get exclusive merch that not even me and GCB, the co-owners and co-founders of SCV Chat, will get. And, of course, for $80 a month, you can join our sponsorship tier and join the likes of these great sponsors. Of course, have you fallen off a fence recently? Have you tweaked your knee? Have you poked yourself in the stick with an eye? Or that sentence got weird real quick. Again, dyslexia. Have you poked your eye with a stick? Can't even get the script I wrote right. Then go check out Dr. Chris Cummins, MD in Oxford, Mississippi. He'll make you feel good and treat you with some great Southern hospitality to the point you're going to want to skip that apple a day so you can go see the doctor. So go check out Dr. Chris Cummins, MD in Oxford, Mississippi. And, of course, while you're, well, no, maybe not while you're driving, but maybe while you're online making your appointment, maybe you should go check out 31st Regiment Engraving. Of course, they have a lot of great products. Of course, they have this memorial band I got to make of my ancestor who served, Private S.O. Dawes. of Mississippi. I get to keep him with me every day and remember why I do what I do. And all the other great products he has. And of course, this comes over from California, Mr. Todd, great man. And of course, he has engraved bottles now, which will certainly be something I buy in the near future. So go check him out at www.31stregengraving.com. You can get some awesome merchandise. And of course, speaking of awesome merchandise, we have Beauregard's Tailor, a family business driven to proudly offer authentic work between the states' reproductions, shirts, flags, lapel pins, and my gosh, so much more. Crafted with phenomenal research and unmatched quality. Go check them out today. One of our great sponsors, of course, helped us with our Funds with Flags episode. Go check them out today at www.beauregardstailor.shop, and you won't regret it. And of course, National SCV Reunion season is upon us, so get you one of those great shirts. And of course, go check out the museum at Market Hall, home of the Confederate Museum since 1899. It is run, of course, by the chapter number 4 of the United Daughters of the Confederacy. It is open Thursday, Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. If the flag is out, they are open. They have some magnificent artifacts, a great museum. Of course, we had them on last week. Go check that episode out to see just some of what they have to offer. Look at this, the beautiful General Beauregard oil painting, the flags, the uniforms, the pistols, the currency, the swords, and my gosh, so much more. So check them out today. And of course, go check out the Sam Davis home in Tennessee. It's a beautiful home. They have a picnic area, walk through the herb garden, nature trails, bring your dog, visit a 19th century smokehouse, kitchen, slaves cabin, and so much more. Visit the final resting place of the Confederate boyhood hero Sam Davis and several of his family members. Inside, you get to watch a film about Davis, explore the museum, participate in scavenger hunts, tour the historic home, and of course, visit their lovely gift shop. So go check them out today at www.samdavishome.org. And of course, we've been talking about it for a while now, but make sure to get 15% off our new, or not our new t-shirt, but if there was any time to buy this t-shirt, it'd be this year. Get 15% off until July 5th. The South was right in 1861 because America was right in 1776 shirt. Use promo code 250. And if you don't know why you need to use the promo code 250, we can't help you. But go check it out. I want to see those worn in July at the National Reunion. I want to see them. I got them. I plan on wearing them to July 4th and causing a whole bunch of trouble. So I can't wait to see you. And we will be right back after this quick commercial break.
There is a place nestled in the rolling farmland of southern Middle Tennessee. A home constructed in 1837, nearly lost to the ravages of war. Saved by a servant and a Confederate general. A place where families loved and lost. If walls could talk, what stories could be told? If a place, a home, can feel love, loss, pain, surely this is one of those places. Nearby is a more recent structure, and inside are the stories of heroes and heroines, stories of battles won and lost, stories of sacrifices made by the people of its native soil. A place that will tell the true and complete story of the Southland and the war fought for its freedom. From the causes that led to the conflict to the modern-day struggles to protect Southern history. Historic Elm Springs and the Confederate Museum at Elm Springs are the general headquarters for the Sons of Confederate Veterans. A place where the story of the Southland and its historic struggle is preserved and told. Come and discover your history.
That commercial always gets me the goosebumps. And of course, you can check all this out and so much more on scvchat.com. Support us on our website. And of course, if you're liking tonight's talk, maybe you should go to www.shotwellpublishing.com/defending Dixie's lands and get the great book by our guest. So let us jump back into the interview, because we got a good little bit left to cover, and time is somehow slipping away from us quickly as we hit a little bit over the halfway part of the show. And let's hit it right off the bat. I told you how much I'm going to enjoy this part. You've talked about Abraham Lincoln's legacy. What part of his legacy do you think is most misrepresented today?
Ooh, that's tough. I would say his views on race. Would have to be at least, in Vermont, we were taught that he was a lover of liberty, of equality, that he viewed blacks and whites completely equal. He wanted all slaves set free, staying in America, voting, and so on. And so to like I said, to read some of those major speeches and read what other historians have written about him and his statements, to say that he was clearly a white supremacist. He never wanted slaves freed across the U.S. He said they don't the natural rights in the United States, they do in Africa. And he always wanted to deport them, slowly free them. He didn't like slavery. They're not lying about that. Neither did many in the South, including slave owners. It was ingrained, it wasn't, as Jefferson said, we had the wolf by the ears and we don't know how to let it go. And so there's a lot of Southerners and slave owners that didn't like slavery. And so Lincoln didn't like slavery, but it doesn't mean he wanted African-American equality at all. He wanted them slowly deported back to Africa, or perhaps in their own all-black state. He didn't want them working with whites, especially in the Western territories, which is what really drove his anti-slavery opinions and politics, is because they won that land for white settlers. They didn't want Southerners bringing their slaves with them. Many of the northern states didn't allow blacks into their state. And so that's definitely Lincoln, is that he wants America white. And he was basically okay with slavery as long as it stayed in the South and didn't bother the rest of America. He definitely prefer for it to not be there, but only if that includes the deportation of blacks. He wouldn't want slavery ended and blacks going throughout the U.S. as free individuals with rights to vote and to marry white people. He didn't want that happening at all, which is all the opposite, of course, of what I was taught.
Yeah, no, that probably is what surprised me the most, learning more about Lincoln as I've grown up. And kind of moving on to that, you kind of talked about it. What do you think Lincoln's primary goal was in the war? Was it preserving the Union, ending slavery, or was it something else entirely, you think?
It definitely wasn't ending slavery. It was preserving the Union. I think it's tough to say. I think almost his ambitions changed during the war, because I think most people thought there would be a couple battles. The North thought they would win them and the war would be over. The South thought they'd win them and earn independence. And, Lincoln couldn't allow the South to go. I'm working on a book now that'll be released eventually. And Lincoln had no option. Either his Republican Party, which was his primary goal. I would say his primary concern was not the United States as a whole. It was preserving the Republican Party in power in their economic system, which was his main political goals. And so to allow the South, he couldn't allow the South to go, because, like I said, it would destroy the whole Northern Republican economic agenda, and the South would dominate. So I would say he wanted to keep the South from independence, really. I would say was his primary thing. Is you can't allow the South to go. You can't allow this Confederacy to compete with the North when he's simply taxing them heavily to fund his agenda in the North. That he not only lose all that tax money, and the Republican they quickly ran out of money. The North, they had to start borrowing from banks with the South gone. And so obviously that's not going to work. You're losing your major tax. And then on top of that, you're going to have to compete with those Southern ports. So I think it was economics to begin with, instituting the economic agenda had in the Republican Party.
All right. I have to agree with you on that. Money. Cause of a lot of problems. But after someone reads your book, what do you want them to be thinking about the great, legacy of Abraham Lincoln after they're done?
I'm sorry, you broke up there a little bit. I believe you said, what do I want them to be thinking about Lincoln when they're done reading my book? That what they've been told about him is not true. That the man that you read about in textbooks or you hear about is not the historical man that I heard one person say we created who we wanted Lincoln to be rather than who he was. A few historians have mentioned after his assassination, the Union as a whole was in a lot of trouble, and they're worried about another civil war, the Civil War continuing, igniting, and they really need something to unify them. And they kind of deified Lincoln and created this image that they thought everyone could love for generations, and he could represent the United States. And so really just that what you've been taught is not true, no matter the subject. He's really been twisted and distorted from the historical person that lived in that time.
All right. So now we're getting into the questions I've been looking forward to. Of course, we already touched on your pen name and the slave narratives, which, again, I thought was a surprising resource that, I didn't even know was out there, honestly. So I am very thankful for your book for bringing that forth. But some of the other stuff was, what do you think about the Upper South's causes for secession?
Right. And we talked about preparing that. I have a few notes here, if that's okay, to kind of read off. So I'm giving a really condensed version here. But before Lincoln, the most essential principle in government is the consent of the governed. And that was given to us by God. It's inherited in a king or a majority or a president in the North. Can't take that away. The 1860, the Virginia General Assembly stated, resolved that the basis of all just government is the consent of the governed, that where this consent exists, there, whatever the form of government, is liberty, and where it is wanting, there, whatever the form of government, is tyranny. So I always use the example, especially for conservatives, to understand, is that a communist is free in a communist country. If he's being forced under a libertarian or conservative form of government, he's not free. He's being forced against his will under a different political system. So this really originates with medieval Christian thought, and it's a traditional understanding of politics that the South had, and that is in the Founding Fathers, the consent of the governed is the most vital principle in government. If you don't have that, you're either free if you do have it, or you're a political slave, and there's no other. It doesn't matter if you're right, if you're left, or whatever your preferences are. What matters is that you have the government that you desire. And that's why we created the Union. The federal government's really only supposed to do international diplomacy in the post office and a few other things. And so the states are supposed to be diverse. This is how we were before 1860. So Vermont could, in today's world, Vermont could be very liberal. Alabama or Mississippi could be very conservative, and they wouldn't have to try to fight and outvote each other. But when we a centralized nation, now it's just this one big political war of people really taking away others' right to self-government to live the way they want. And they're trying to impose their ways on everyone else, because either you impose your way on them or they're going to impose their way on you. And no one actually has the consent of the governed anymore when you're a centralized nation. And so under a union, that's the diversity. That's the states that allowed everyone to move and live with like-minded people and have the government they want without tyrannizing others. And so obviously that's on the mindset of the Upper South. And then you have the Cotton States leave the Union. And at this time, across the Upper South, overwhelmingly, the leaders and the people reject secession. They are completely against secession. The statistics are huge. There's a wave, really, of Union patriotism across the Upper South, where they attach even closer to the North. And they say, we're not going with the South. They viewed it, there's almost a central confederacy of both slave and free states. But from this perspective of somewhat the middle of the country, they view the North, the Republicans, as radical because they're trying to institute this centralized government and they're expanding beyond the Constitution. So they're radical. But the South, the Deep South, the Cotton States, they're radical too because their reaction of secession, Lincoln hasn't even taken office yet. And they're saying, you're overreacting, you're kind of hot-headed. They saw this, the central states in the Upper South as the only conservative section left of the country. They're kind of, everyone else has gone mad, the North and the South. And so that's their perspective. And across the North, there's Whig counties and there's Democrat counties. If a Democrat leader is pro-secessionist in a Democrat county, he loses to the Whig who's pro-unionist. And likewise, in the Whig counties, if a Democrat is pro-union and the Whig is pro-secessionist, the Union wins the election. So it's huge across all political lines. The North is just attached, the Upper South stays in the Union. They reject secession. And so at the same time, again, the leaders are condemning the Cotton States for their secession. So Virginia Unionist R.L. Dabney, who served on the staff of Stonewall Jackson, he said of the Cotton States, they're as great a pest as the abolitionist. A future Confederate general who died leading a charge at Antietam, Tennessee Congressman Robert Hatton called the secessionists conspirators and wicked and reckless revolutionaries. Future Confederate William R. Hurley, who's the editor of the Nashville Democrat, called the Southern secessionists cotton lords and cotton traders. And you see throughout the Upper South states, like there's no attachment to secession. The secession wave has gone. It's been crushed by these leaders. But at the same time, they condemned coercion, any attempt at coercion. So they said to Lincoln, you have to allow these Cotton States to go. If you don't allow them to go, you're denying that consent of the governed. You're taking what good government is based on, and you're turning us into a military despotism of tyranny, and you're destroying liberty. And so Virginia Unionist R.L. Dabney, again, he said, however wrongfully any state might resume its independence, without just cause, the only remedy was conciliation and not force, that therefore the coercion of a sovereign state was unlawful, mischievous, and must be resisted. And Virginia governor, who was also a Unionist, John Letcher, he told the North and Lincoln, he said, quote, I will regard any attempt to pass federal troops across the territory of Virginia for the purpose of coercing a southern seceding state as an act of invasion which shall be met and repelled. And of course, Lincoln didn't listen to him, and he did call for volunteers, and he asked the Upper South to contribute. And so it's the most revolutionary act in American history, I believe, even more so perhaps than adopting the Constitution from the Articles of Confederation, because it completely flips our understanding of governance. It elevates the federal government above the states. It's now saying that Lincoln can use military force to keep these states in the Union. These are not free states of people that get to decide their own government, that have the consent of the governed. Instead, it's going to be imposed on them under the threats of violence if they leave the Union. And Thomas D. Lorenzo, who I'm sure you're familiar with, wrote Real Lincoln and Lincoln Unmasked. It's a great quote. He quotes Charles L.C. Minor, who wrote, quote, the Civil War was that the right to govern is paramount over the right to live, that man is made for government rather than government is made for man, and that for men to claim the right of self-government is to deserve and incur the death penalty. And so after Lincoln calls for volunteers, the Upper South sees this as the most tyrannical you've completely destroyed the Union, you've destroyed the consent of the governed, and you're now playing master over these southern states. And so now they completely flip from overwhelmingly rejecting secession. Now all these upper South states say, we're not being part of this tyrannical action. We are joining the Confederacy. And one last quote to finish up. This is a former Unionist, Samuel G. Staples, who worked to quell secession in Virginia. He was a strong Unionist. And this is at the proceedings of the Virginia State Convention. He said, 10 days ago, I was known as a Union man attached to the Union of these states. At the same time, I declared my unalterable opposition to any attempt of the part of the federal government to coerce any seceding states back in the Union as in direct violation of the fundamental principles of the government. This principle, held sacred in the bosom of all true Virginians, that has aroused the people of Virginia to arms. He said, the question is now narrowed down to this. Shall Virginia unite her fortunes with the Northern people and take part in this war of subjugation and conquest, or shall she resume the powers she conferred upon the federal government? If there were Union men in Virginia once, there are no Union men here now. It is now a question of freedom or slavery, of honor or dishonor. And that's why I think the proper term for the Civil War is the War for Southern Independence, at least when we're referring to the Upper South, because they saw it in the same way as the revolution from King George in England. They were fighting for their own self-government and not being coerced by a distant, more powerful majority in England. Well, the South was doing the same thing in America, and that's what our government was supposedly founded upon. But now Lincoln's transforming that consent, free consent in the Union of free people, the land of the free, and he's now saying the government is above the people, that the people are really there to serve as tax slaves for the economic agenda of the government, which just puts us in the same place or worse, really, that we were with King George. And so that's absolutely the cause of the Upper South and why they left.
Well, sadly, we are quickly running out of time. It's been a great show, Mr. Smith. I'm so glad to have you on. And what an answer to end the show on. That was phenomenal. We got so many people during that answer being like, wow, yeah, this is a great episode. So I do want to encourage everybody real quick. The link is going in the chat. Again, Shotwell Publishing, Defending Dixie's Land. Of course, it is scrolling across the screen. I highly encourage y'all to go support Mr. Smith. Get his book. Again, it is a phenomenal tool for the toolbox to steal something from Jason. Again, we need these tools. We need to understand them. We need to read them. We need to have them in the back of our head for these debates, for these arguments, just to have the information ourselves even. It is very important. We understand the war so we can defend Dixie. So thank you again, Mr. Smith. Is there anything you want to talk to our viewers about before we end up the show and wrap it up? Is there any way they could support you more? I know you talked about your upcoming book, which is awesome. I'm glad to hear that you're still going, but anything like that?
You can follow me on X and on Facebook. I always update my articles and videos and anything book related. You can definitely find on Facebook and X. Check out shotwellpublishing.com because they have hundreds of pro-South books on any subject that you could desire to read about. And thank you for having me on.
Well, thank you, Mr. Smith. And before we start wrapping up, I do want to put a couple of these books on there, or these comments on, because just as James Martin said, his camp is working on getting a copy to every history teacher in their area.
He told me.
Todd in California says your book will be going into our local library as a donation.
Probably get burned there in California.
But and this is something else from Todd. You can't change a mind, but you can get them to start questioning what they've been taught, and that will, in turn, in my opinion, change a mind. I do agree with that. And of course, again, we've talked about them all show. Our legendary historian that's on the chat tonight, Dr. Sandy Mitchum, of course, the author of so many history books that we'd be here all night telling you about them. Really one of the world famous historians we've had on the show, saying the victor writes the history, but these people have abused the privilege. We need more books like Defending Dixie's Land. And again, kind of the same thing with Dr. Wilson. If Dr. Mitchum is giving you this, you know it's a great book and that y'all need to go out and get it. And Charles Ray says, can't wait to get a copy. Our camp will purchase and donate it in honor of Confederate History and Heritage Month. That is just awesome. I am confirming that you're already my camp's pick for next year's Confederate History and Heritage Month to donate the book to the library. We picked it at our meeting, so you'll get to join the ranks of we've donated books from the Kennedys, from Dr. Mitchum, and so much more. So you'll get to join those ranks. And of course, real quick, I want to thank our sponsors, and one more time, thank Mr. Jeb Smith for coming on. Make sure to share this episode out, guys. We want to have a big audience for this episode, so continue to share it out so people can keep getting it. And yes, Facebook has gotten to where they'll take episodes off after a month. Don't you worry. It is on YouTube. Just go to SCV Chat on YouTube and we'll pop up and you can see this wonderful episode again. And of course, it is now on the SCV Chat website in our archived episode if you want to find it easier. It's perfect. It's easy. Just write this down so you can share this episode out. Thank you all for watching. Make sure to tune in to Tennessee Tuesdays tomorrow at 7 p.m. Confederate Standard Time. And of course, we will be back with Look Around the Confederation this Thursday at 7 p.m. Confederate Standard Time. And of course, Look Around Florida is on Wednesday. Hardy on History with Michael C. Hardy is on Sunday. And, of course, Friday night's Lights with the Friends of the Douglas Southall Freeman Group. Thank you all for watching. And, of course, thank you to our Patreon members. And without any further ado, stay Southern, my friends. Good night.